Kia ora, good evening. February primary product exports flourished with a 17% rise in the value of exported goods compared to February last year. Milk powder, logs and sheep meat exports all rose, contributing to the $663 million rise in exported goods in February that totalled $4.6 billion for the month. Exports to China rose 49% or $388 million, largely driven by primary products, according to Statistics New Zealand. Meanwhile, the value of imported goods rose 8% to $3.7 billion for this February compared to the same month last year. The trade balance for February was a surplus of $818 million, or 18% of exports, the highest ever trade surplus for any February month, and compares with a $432 million surplus in February 2013. From Monday, the Inland Revenue Department will be able to obtain arrest warrants for New Zealanders living offshore that have fallen behind in their student loan repayments.
Recent changes to legislation also mean that any overseas-based borrower with a student loan of $45,000 must repay $4,000 per year, up from $3,000. And if a loan is in excess of $60,000, at least $5,000 must be repaid per year. Revenue Minister Todd McClay says borrowers began reacting to the changes soon after Parliament passed the legislation earlier this month. He says that between 7th of February and 6th of March this year, IRD got about 74 calls per day around student loans. When the law was passed and publicised, the number increased to 125 calls per day between the 7th and 25th of this month. Critics of the changes believe threatening to arrest borrowers behind on their loan repayments on their return to New Zealand will mean they simply stay away. Mr McClay says that there are about 110,000 student loan debtors living overseas and 61,000 are in arrears by a combined total of nearly $500 million.
A Southland Uganda connection is paying off for a charity that's led Peace Ruhuruza of the Fountain of Peace Children's Foundation back to the South to share her vision for children in her homeland. Generally, there is no sustainable income for the 5,000-strong community where the Fountain of Peace Children's Foundation operates. People are so poor, pens, books or uniforms for school are unaffordable. It's a familiar scene for Ugandan woman Peace Ruhuruza, who, along with 13 siblings, was abandoned as a toddler and left to survive alone in abject poverty.
I encountered things that you'd never wish a child would ever encounter in life. Abuses, beatings, denying food, burnings, was burnt. I was left in the jungle on my own. And in summary, that is my childhood. And I'm talking between 5 years old.
But then things changed. You became a Tier Fund sponsored child.
Yes, in my last and sixth home where I went to live, things were slightly different. I was taken to a school where Tier Fund was sponsoring children, and that's when I got an opportunity to find a friend in a stranger who became my sponsor, who became my supporter, who became the encouragement that I needed as a child, who spoke words of life, words like, you can make it in life, whatever you want, just go for it. And those very words I took dear, so dear that they are the words that are still pushing me up now.
Tier Fund brought her to New Zealand and in contact with local woman Jane Laurie, creating a connection that's seen Southern supporters travel to Uganda and build several buildings, including baby nurseries and a school.
Every house, every single wing of the house will be housing 16 babies with a mother and some supporters. And those mothers will stay with these children. They'll own them. They'll be their own babies. That when they grow up to 3 years, they'll be transferred to an independent house, which will be their permanent home of residence forever. As long as they live, that will be home. We put up a simple structure, same permanent structure, so that kids can go to school and get a teacher or two. But then we shared with New Zealand team, say, guys, the SOS right now is a school. We have so many kids in the community who are not going to school. And the New Zealand team put together funds. They created a team. They actually traveled to Uganda and built a school. Right now we have 6 classrooms taking on over 200 children between the age of 3 and 8.
A secondary school and hospital are in the long-term plans.
And I want it to be a place where dreams are birthed in the lives of children. I want to be a place of refuge, a heaven for children, whereby a girl will look right into the eyes of their abuser and say, no, I won't do that, and have a place to go back to. Because most of the times, girls or children used to succumb to the demands of their abusers just to buy a roof over their heads, just to buy a place of belonging. And they had to go through all these mischievous things just because they didn't have a choice. And I want to give them that right.
Another southern contingent of charity workers leaves Invercargill in May, bound for Uganda. Margot Southland, South Today News. The intersection of Kennington Road and the Woodlands Invercargill Highway has gained national notoriety for the wrong reasons. The Transport Agency has released its list of New Zealand's top 100 highest risk intersections, and sitting at number 71 is the Kennington and State Highway intersection. Between 2003 and 2012, there were 4 crashes resulting in serious injuries and a number resulting in minor injuries. Last October, the Transport Agency began trialling a new system that automatically slows vehicles travelling on State Highway 1, restricting their speed to 70 kilometres an hour when another vehicle approaches the intersection on Kennington Road. The trial will run for a further 18 months. Stay with us. Still to come after the break, it's Bird Week, and we look at an accommodation alternative for senior citizens. Welcome back. This week is Bird Week, and the public are being encouraged to get involved in educational and bird preservation activities around Southland. Every week has been Bird Week for May and Russell Evans, who run the Bushhaven Rehabilitation Centre in Otatara. For a decade, the couple have nursed native birds back to health following accidents with windows and vehicles. We followed May and Russell through an average morning, caring for the latest batch of injured native birds.
I've been feeding 2 young birds from boxes with what we call puree. It's bananas and peaches and bread and all that sort of stuff, all combined. So they drink it as a puree, and then I've given it a bit of solids, some bread, some peas and corn, so that it gets used to eating the solids. So I fed 2 babies, and now we've got this one in here that we're going to feed.
It's quite obvious, isn't it, that the bird life is returning, particularly out here in Otatara, but in the city as well?
Yes, it definitely is. Yes, most of our birds come from Otatara, but we do have quite a few from the city. Albert Street, we've had a few, 1 or 2 from South Invercargill as well, so they're all around, and they're very special to have in the trees.
You mentioned that you've had a lot of younger birds this year. What do you put that down to?
We put that down to the fact, in Otatara especially, that people have been controlling pests on their property, and we would like more people to do that. Often if a neighbour is baiting traps or baiting bait stations, we call them, with poison, they get a take from so many, and then it goes off and then it comes back, and often they're being infested from their neighbours who are not trapping. And the bird life has really come back. Most people have noticed a lot of baby bellbirds and baby tuis this year. So the more people that can do it, the more bird life we will have, the better bird chorus.
This bird in particular looks really injured. What was the extent of its injuries, and how? I mean, nothing comes cheap. How do you get this work done to these birds?
The work is done from Vetco, and our vet is out there, Dr. Lisa Stewart, and this bird in this cage here flew through a glasshouse window. It broke the window. It damaged itself in the front, which we call the crop, quite severely. The skin was well torn back, and the muscle inside was also needing repair. So Lisa stitched it all up inside with dissolvable stitching, and then the outside with stitches that later came out. And now it's, as you can see when you look up close, its feathers are actually growing again on that left side. It's got a lot of feather growth. It's got a lot of sitting around to do yet before it can. We can hope to release it.
Do you think these birds realise that you are assisting them? Do you get that feeling at all?
Definitely. Some birds are what we call more stroppy, and they object to sitting in a cage, but most of them seem quite content until all of a sudden they must feel somewhat better, and then they start to climb around the cage a bit. and that's the stage they go down to another aviary outside.
And Bird Week continues tonight with an owl night at Queen's Park. Be at the Feldwick Gates at 8 o'clock and bring a torch. A number of environmental report cards for the region have been released, including a roundup of air quality in the south over 2013. Environment Southland monitors air quality continuously in Invercargill and Gore, and last year included Winton. During winter last year, there were 12 air quality exceedances in Invercargill, 3 in Gore and none in Winton. These results show Invercargill almost halved its air quality breaches from 23 for the same period in 2012, while Gore was 50% lower than the 6 recorded the previous winter. Higher coal consumption for heating is the main contributor to the breaches, which were well above the allowed exceedance of 1 per area per year. There are many lifestyle options for senior citizens. Some live on at home, others prefer the atmosphere of a retirement village or home. Some are opting to share a home. Earlier this month, former MP for Invercargill, JB Munro, was in the region promoting the all-volunteer organisation called Abbeyfield. Abbeyfield's a concept that sees older people living together in one residence, and Mr Munro believes it's time there was such a house in Invercargill.
Well, Abbeyfield is an organisation that has developed ex-England, is now in 17 countries providing housing for older people. And in Dunedin we have an Abbeyfield house, we've got them in Queenstown, there's a house in Queenstown. In fact, we've got 10 Abbeyfield houses across New Zealand and are keen to encourage more.
What is the concept? What's behind the concept?
The concept focuses on older folk, older people who have found that as age has crept up on them, that their own home is too big to look after. In the main, they've probably lost their partner. And so what Abbeyfield provides, like in Dunedin, we have a home on Balmacewen Road for 8 elderly people. Our eldest resident is 95. We had another resident, 96, who just died recently. And our youngest resident will be 78, 79. So it's in that average age. And in fact, Abbeyfield across the world is averaging about 83 or 84 years of age for people who come into care. Not so much care, but just to provide a support environment for people with their own room, do their own thing, come and go, put in a housekeeper, provide the meals, and it works like a charm.
Do you think Invercargill is a good location for one?
Oh, absolutely. And Invercargill has a reputation of being great support for community activities and community services and support anyway. And while there are more and more big villages being constructed, not everybody can afford to go in. A lot of people don't want the big gathering. So yes, there's no reason at all why every town and city, and particularly the towns, couldn't have an Abbeyfield house there. Occupancy is a real challenge. One of our residents died the other day. It takes time to refill that suite. So those are some of the problems we have to cope with, but we're still there and it's working well.
How far down the track are you down here? You're just here sounding people out about the concept?
Sounding people out around the concept. Came to Rotary because I'm a former Invercargill Rotary Club member anyway. And in other words, we're trying to sell the story, and we are optimistic.
Next up in sport, we talk to Sally Hayes about the state of multi-sport in the south. From the news team, good night.